So usually when we sit down to talk about a major global crisis,
Hmm.
there is there's this expectation of like cinematic chaos,
Oh, absolutely.
right? You picture a giant servo farm suddenly going dark in this massive flash of sparks, or I don't know, some panicked engineer sprinting down a glass corridor while red alarms are just blaring through a corporate headquarters. We expect noise.
Yeah, we expect the flashing warnings on the giant screens. It's totally Hollywood conditioning. We want our paradigm shifts to be visible. Like the system is either online and functioning or it's catastrophically crashing. There's no in between.
Exactly. But when you look at what happened this week at the absolute bleeding edge of artificial intelligence, that whole Hollywood image is completely shattered. I mean, we are looking at a landscape that shifted in total, terrifying silence.
Utter silence.
Yeah. There were no flashing buttons, no sirens, just a quiet, familiar chat window that is essentially masking this massive, invisible machinery of power moving right behind it.
And that is exactly what we're breaking down today.
All right, so welcome to the Deep Dive. This is Silicon Drama by eTeos.com. And I want to be clear with you listening right now, Silicon Drama is not a normal tech news recap. It is a weekly power drama about AI, humanoid robots, big tech, chips, compute, agents, CEOs, and basically the people fighting for influence over the future.
It's a power struggle.
It is the power struggle. And today we are looking at the exact week the illusion broke. This is the week that artificial intelligence stopped being harmless software and started aggressively colliding with passports, physical borders, corporate debt, human biology, and raw geopolitical control.
We are officially moving from the realm of coding into the realm of concrete and consequences. It is a profound transition because behind that smooth interface you use every day, you suddenly had government offices, bond desks, and export control lists waking up to a totally new reality.
Right.
The illusion that AI is just a cool little tool on your laptop is over.
It's totally over. Let's start with the geopolitics of it all, because this is where the shift was probably the most jarring. So for the past couple of years, Anthropic, and specifically their CEO, Dario Amodei, they have brilliantly positioned themselves as the adults in the room.
Oh yeah, the cardigan-wearing adults.
Exactly.
Yeah.
While all the other labs were rushing to push out the loudest, flashiest models, Anthropic spoke this very measured, very academic language. They built their entire brand around, constitutional AI and safety.
And to really understand why that strategy was so effective, I mean, we have to look at how these models were traditionally trained, right? So in the early days, companies used something called RLHF.
Reinforcement learning from human feedback.
Yes. So you literally had thousands of human workers rating AI responses to teach the model what was helpful and what was dangerous. But that does not scale. Humans are slow, they're biased, and they're expensive.
Yeah.
So Anthropic pioneered constitutional AI, where you give the AI a foundational set of rules, literally a constitution, and the AI evaluates its own training outputs against those rules. It automated safety.
Which is huge.
It's massive. And in a world where governments barely understand this technology but intrinsically fear it, presenting yourself as the lab with a self-policing constitutional system, that is a massive form of soft power.
They became the trusted harbor. It was basically, when the frontier gets too wild, come to us.
Right.
But that trusted status just got subjected to a brutal stress test with the release of their models, Fable 5 and Mythos 5. And this dispute, it didn't start with a politician making a grand speech. It started deep in the trenches of cybersecurity. The core concern was about a specific jailbreak.
Yeah, and we should probably clarify what a jailbreak means in the context of a large language model.
Yeah, please do, because it's not like hacking an iPhone.
No, we aren't talking about plugging in a cable to install custom software. In AI, a jailbreak is an adversarial prompt. It's a carefully constructed set of linguistic instructions designed to bypass the model's safety guardrails.
It's basically social engineering.
Exactly. It's social engineering, but applied to a neural network. What researchers found was that if you applied a highly sophisticated jailbreak to Fable 5, you could unlock vulnerability-finding behaviors that were, honestly, dangerously close to the capabilities of Anthropic's much stronger, restricted model, Mythos.
So we're talking about a model that, if tricked properly, could start scanning code or networks or critical infrastructure to find security flaws at terrifying speeds. And Anthropic naturally tried to downplay this.
Of course they did.
They argued that vulnerability discovery is a broad issue across the entire industry, not something totally unique to their architecture. But Washington did not see a software bug. They saw a rapidly expanding attack surface.
Well, and what really escalated this from a nerdy technical debate to a full-blown national security incident was the involvement of Amazon.
Wait, okay, let's pause here. Because if this is just a cybersecurity debate among researchers, how does it escalate to the Commerce Department? How does Amazon trigger that?
Because Amazon's role is the crucial mechanism here. Amazon is an investor in Anthropic, sure, but more importantly, they are the cloud provider. They provide the bare metal.
Right, AWS.
AWS hosts the compute infrastructure that makes these models run. They don't just see the polished API outputs like you or I do. They see the memory spikes. They see the processing loads, the raw behavior of the machine.
Wow.
So when a cloud powerhouse of Amazon's scale identifies cracks in Fable's behavior and actually raises a flag, it carries an undeniable gravity.
So we're no longer talking about software patches or like updated terms of service.
Yeah.
When Amazon flags a vulnerability that accelerates cyber warfare capabilities, it builds a bridge directly to the Commerce Department. And this is where my mind gets completely blown by the regulatory mechanics. How do you actually regulate a neural network? It's just math. It's weights. When the Commerce Department steps in, they aren't asking Anthropic to write better safety code. They're essentially trying to build a border wall around a piece of mathematics.
They're shifting paradigms. They stop viewing the model as a commercial software product, and they start treating it like enriched uranium or aerospace technology. The language changes entirely. It goes from user agreements to access, restriction, and export controls.
That's wild.
The U.S. government operates on the premise that certain capabilities, like automated vulnerability discovery at scale, simply cannot be allowed to fall into the hands of adversarial states. So the Commerce Department steps in and says, this specific cluster of weights, this specific capability cannot be accessed by foreign entities.
Anthropic pushed back, obviously. I mean, they are a business. They want to serve a global market. But the White House held the line. And suddenly, a large language model gained a border. It gained a geopolitical footprint. It's wild to think about a piece of software needing a passport to be used in another country. But that is exactly what happened. And it spilled straight into the G7 summit. I want to put you, the listener, in that room for a second. You have Emmanuel Macron, the president of France, and his fears are entirely about European sovereignty.
Oh, completely.
He's looking at this Commerce Department intervention and thinking, what happens if European hospitals, banks, and power grids build their infrastructure on American AI, and then one day Washington decides to just turn the switch off?
Macron is identifying the defining geopolitical anxiety of our era. Because if the foundational operating system of your economy can vanish overnight by the stroke of a pen in Washington, D.C., you do not have a sovereign nation.
No.
You are a digital vassal state. During the Cold War, sovereignty was defined by who controlled the oil and who possessed the nuclear deterrent. In the 2020s, sovereignty is defined by who controls the compute and who has access to the frontier models.
And sitting right near that massive political tension is OpenAI's Sam Altman, delivering this incredibly calculated performance of humility. He tells the room of world leaders, AI labs can build the technology, but democratic societies must write the rules.
Right.
It sounds so deferential, but it's actually an unbelievable flex. He is recognizing that the labs have birthed something so powerful that standard corporate governance is basically obsolete.
It is a masterclass in rhetorical positioning. Altman is simultaneously acknowledging his status as the architect of this immense power, while offering to submit to the state's authority, which of course comforts the politicians. But the practical output of this dynamic is a new framework called the Trusted Partner Scheme.
Which has to be the most bureaucratic, sleep-inducing phrase ever coined. Trusted Partner Scheme sounds like a loyalty rewards program for like a mid-tier hotel chain.
No, it sounds dull by design. Bureaucracies always hide the most aggressive power grabs behind boring language. In reality, the Trusted Partner Scheme is the new map of the world. It determines who gets the key to the cognitive infrastructure of the future. Which country is deemed secure enough to access the frontier models? Which multinational corporation stays on the approved list? And critically, who gets cut off?
And the fallout from this was completely asymmetrical. Some early preview users of the Mythos model maintained their access after the restrictions hit, while others were suddenly locked out.
Because power rarely moves in clean, straight lines.
Exactly. It moves through exceptions, back-channel phone calls, and quiet spreadsheets of approved IP addresses. The old software world was governed by regional licensing agreements. The new frontier AI world is governed by intelligence community risk assessments and alliance politics.
It's a totally different game.
But, while governments were arguing over how to restrict access to the models, there was a massive shift in the human capital that actually builds them. Noam Shazir crossed the street from Google to OpenAI.
And on the surface, a senior software engineer changing employers happens thousands of times a day in Silicon Valley. But framing Noam Shazir as just an engineer is like calling Oppenheimer just a physicist.
Right, it totally understates it.
To understand why this is a seismic event, we have to look at what Shazir actually built. He is a co-author of the legendary 2017 paper, Attention is All You Need.
Yes. This is the paper that introduced the transformer architecture, the literal T in ChatGPT. For anyone who doesn't spend their weekends reading computer science papers, before 2017, AI read text sequentially. It read a sentence word by word, kind of like a human does, using recurrent neural networks.
Which was incredibly slow.
So slow. And the AI would often forget the beginning of a long paragraph by the time it reached the end.
But the transformer architecture changed everything. It allowed the AI to ingest an entire massive block of text simultaneously. It used an attention mechanism to mathematically map the relationships between every single word in that block all at once.
That single breakthrough allowed for parallel processing, which meant you could train models on thousands of GPUs simultaneously. It is literally the engine of the current AI boom. And Shazir wasn't just there at the beginning. He was instrumental in scaling it. He played a massive role in building Google's Gemini.
Exactly. Google had already spent a fortune to bring him and part of the Character.ai team back into their ecosystem. So for him to now leave Google and walk into OpenAI, it's a staggering transfer of intellectual property, but not the kind you can patent. It's inside his head.
It's locked in his brain.
He represents infrastructure in human form. When you are training a model with hundreds of billions or even trillions of parameters, you don't just press a button and walk away. The training process is chaotic. The loss curves spike randomly. Hardware fails. Bizarre mathematical instabilities cause the model to output total garbage after a month of perfect training. Shazir carries what you might call training scars.
Oh man, I love that phrase, training scars.
It's really the only way to describe it. He possesses an architectural instinct that cannot be taught in a university or documented in a wiki. He has a visceral, battle-tested sense for which counterintuitive mathematical tweak might actually scale, and which promising idea will inevitably collapse at the trillion-parameter mark.
Yeah.
He remembers the specific failures that occurred years before the solutions became obvious to the rest of the industry.
So for Sam Altman, bringing Shazir into OpenAI isn't just about adding a smart guy to the payroll. It's about acquiring a map of the landmines. And for Google CEO, Sundar Pichai, it is a glaring public bleed of top-tier talent.
It's gotta hurt.
Oh, absolutely. It proves that while this entire war is ultimately fought with silicon chips and billions of dollars of capital, the front line still dramatically shifts based on the intuition of a few dozen hyper-elite human minds.
But Shazir represents the very top of the intellectual food chain. There is a totally different, intensely physical layer to this economy that is being radically reshaped at the exact same time.
Yes, let's talk about that. Because it's not happening in a pristine coding lab in Mountain View. It's happening on a factory floor in Texas with a welding torch. We need to talk about Juan Hernandez, a former SpaceX welder from Mexico.
It's such a striking contrast. We spend so much time discussing abstract algorithms and massive corporate valuations, but at the end of the day, someone has to physically join the metal to build the rockets that launch the satellites that transmit the data.
Exactly. We were talking about SpaceX, a company with a private valuation soaring well past $100 billion. And then you have Juan, a regular guy with a welding mask and a paycheck. But after the recent SpaceX secondary stock sale and liquidity events, reports emerged that Juan, along with potentially thousands of other long-term, blue-collar SpaceX employees, walked away as millionaires.
Which highlights the dual nature of how capital is being weaponized and distributed right now. When a company achieves the kind of dominance SpaceX has, its equity unlocks a completely different kind of leverage. Consider how Elon Musk is operating in the wider market. He uses company stock as literal ammunition. We saw SpaceX move to acquire Anyfear, the company behind the cursor coding platform, in a massive all-stock transaction. He didn't have to drain his cash reserves. The shares themselves are the currency.
And we should unpack why Musk wants Cursor in the first place, because it's deeply tied to this idea of leverage. Cursor is an AI-first code editor. traditional software development involved engineers sitting at a keyboard, manually typing out thousands of lines of syntax, hunting for missing semicolons.
A nightmare.
Right. But Cursor represents a paradigm shift where the developer becomes a conductor. You don't type the code. You prompt the AI agent. You say, build a physics simulation for a thruster firing at a vacuum and integrate it with our telemetry dashboard.
And the agent writes the code.
It writes it, debugs it, and presents it for review. If your entire company is essentially a massive high-speed engineering machine building rockets and satellites, controlling the foundational layer where your engineers actually write their code is the ultimate strategic advantage. It makes every single engineer 10 times faster.
But while Musk is playing that macroeconomic chess game, aggressively acquiring the AI tools of production, the sheer gravitational pull of that valuation reaches all the way down to the factory floor. And that brings us back to the welder.
Yeah.
The exact same financial mechanism that allows a billionaire to swallow up a cutting-edge AI startup is the mechanism that rewards the people bending the steel.
It is the wildest, most chaotic expression of ownership capitalism. If you look at Europe, the economic conversation is endlessly focused on worker protection, regulatory safety nets, and algorithmic compliance. America, for better or worse, operates on ownership and extreme leverage.
It is brutally uneven.
It is. It leaves immense numbers of people behind. But when the system functions as designed, the guy holding the welding tool gets to hold a financial piece of the rocket he just built. It's a democratization of the upside that you simply don't see in other industrial models.
It grounds these astronomical tech valuations in tangible human reality. But, every upside has a cost.
Yes.
If workers are cashing in and holding pieces of the rocket, and if OpenAI is paying astronomical salaries to poach human infrastructure like Noam Shazir, we have to ask the critical question.
Who is footing the bill?
Exactly. Who is actually footing the bill for this entire empire?
Because the financial leverage underpinning the AI boom is getting absolutely terrifying.
Yeah.
If you want to know the true cost of this revolution, you don't look at a keynote presentation from a CEO, you look at the bond market. And this week, the bond market was screaming. Jensen Huang, the CEO of NVIDIA, didn't even need to make a public statement. NVIDIA quietly went out to the debt markets to raise billions of dollars in corporate bonds, and the investor demand was staggering.
Which should immediately prompt a question from anyone paying attention, right? NVIDIA is the undisputed king of the GPU market. They are selling the H100 and B200 chips that every single tech company is desperate for. Their profit margins are historical. They are effectively printing money.
Right.
Why on earth does a company drowning in cash need to raise billions of dollars in debt?
It's because the scale of the physical infrastructure required to sustain AI is unlike anything we have attempted in modern industrial history. The old software world, the Web 2.0 era of apps and social networks, was beautiful for investors because it operated on zero marginal cost.
The golden era.
Right. You build a photo-sharing app, it might cost millions to develop the first version. But to distribute that app to the next million users costs almost nothing. The software is infinitely perfectly replicable.
But AI has destroyed the zero marginal cost paradigm. AI has brought the physical bill back to the tech industry. When you talk about scaling an AI company today, you are no longer talking about renting a few extra server racks in a co-location facility.
No.
You are talking about heavy, brutal industrial engineering. You are buying vast tracts of land. You are entering into cutthroat negotiations with municipalities for massive industrial water rights just to cool the data centers. You are battling for grid access, hoarding massive electrical transformers, laying thousands of tons of concrete, and signing 20-year nuclear energy contracts.
Think about the last time you asked an AI model to summarize a PDF or draft an email for you. You typed a sentence, hit enter, and 2 seconds later, a perfectly written response appeared on your screen. Your laptop stayed completely cool. The experience felt totally weightless. It felt like magic.
But the bond market is showing us the hidden, heavy reality of that request. Somewhere in a concrete facility the size of 3 football fields, a cluster of GPUs ran so violently hot to generate your email that they required hundreds of gallons of chilled water to stop from melting down.
Yeah.
The electricity required for that single inference was drawn from a grid that is already struggling to keep the lights on in the surrounding city.
The interface is light, but the foundation is incredibly heavy. And the financial burn rate reflects that reality. OpenAI's revenue is skyrocketing, yes, but their reported cash burn is astronomical. They are losing billions in a single quarter.
They possess the financial cost profile of a massive 19th century infrastructure project, like building the Transcontinental Railroad or the Hoover Dam. But they're trying to apply the valuation logic of a 21st century software startup.
It's not just OpenAI. Oracle is feeling immense pressure from Wall Street over their capital expenditures. Meta is signing multi-billion-dollar compute deals, buying up GPUs by the hundreds of thousands. Google is frantically trying to offset costs by pushing its own custom silicon, the TPUs.
Everyone is trapped in the same race.
Every major player is trapped in the exact same frantic race. They need more compute, more power, more land, and more debt. The entire AI empire is currently floating on a massive ocean of borrowed money and raw electrical power.
And that collision between digital ambition and physical constraint is the defining theme of the week. Which brings us to how these AI systems are beginning to directly map and manipulate the physical world. Let's look at the medical sector, because the transition from software to hardware took a profoundly unexpected turn with David Holtz and Midjourney.
Oh man, this is genuinely one of the most bizarre and fascinating pivots of the year.
Yeah.
So David Holtz is the founder of Midjourney. He is the guy who effectively taught the internet how to hallucinate.
Yeah.
You type a few words into a prompt, and his AI generates impossibly beautiful, hyper-realistic images of cyberpunk cities, fantasy creatures, or fake historical events. He mastered the visual AI wave. And now, out of nowhere, he announces he is launching Midjourney Medical.
It sounds like a satire of Silicon Valley hubris. The guy who makes fake images now wants to scan your actual internal organs. But if you look at the underlying technology, it makes total sense. We need to paint a picture of the physical machine he is proposing.
Let's do it.
When you normally think of high-fidelity medical imaging, you think of radiation. You think of X-rays, or you think of being slowly slid into a claustrophobic MRI tunnel inside a freezing cold, sterile hospital room while massive magnets clank loudly around your head.
It's a deeply clinical, anxiety-inducing experience.
Holt's proposing something radically different. Imagine walking into what looks like a high-end wellness spa. You step into a warm, shallow pool of water. You stand on a platform. That platform slowly lowers your body through a ring of advanced ultrasonic sensors.
Wow.
They are utilizing semiconductor chips from a company called Butterfly Network. These chips use capacitive micromachined ultrasonic transducer CMUTs. Instead of generating magnetic fields or firing ionizing radiation, these chips emit incredibly precise sound waves through your tissue from thousands of different intersecting angles.
So the sound waves travel through your body, hit your organs, your bones, your blood vessels, and bounce back.
Exactly. And this is where the AI comes in. Historically, ultrasound gives you a grainy, black and white, two-dimensional slice. But if you take those millions of sound wave reflections and feed them into a massive neural network using the exact same spatial reconstruction algorithms that Midjourney uses to understand 3D geometry in its image generation, the compute power reconstructs a perfectly detailed, fully volumetric 3D map of your internal anatomy.
He wants to do this in a spa setting, like hot tubs, saunas, cold plunges, and a full-body internal scanner just sitting there like a piece of luxury gym equipment. No radiation, just water, sound, and a massive amount of mathematical processing.
It's wild.
The utopia promise here is undeniably huge. We are talking about cheap, frequent, radiation-free scans. You could track your body composition, tumor growth, or arterial plaque longitudinally over decades. You could spot the earliest microscopic signals of a disease long before a single physical symptom ever arises.
That's the dream.
But wait, a hot tub that maps my internal organs sounds like a Silicon Valley wellness grift. Human biology is incredibly messy. If I step into this thing on a Tuesday afternoon after a workout, and the AI reconstructs my liver and flags a tiny, ambiguous 1 millimeter shadow, am I just supposed to relax in the sauna? This feels like a fast track to a massive panic attack over a false positive.
And your skepticism is exactly why actual medical professionals and radiologists are sounding the alarm. The human body is full of harmless anomalies, cysts, benign nodules, weird anatomical variations. If you scan healthy people constantly with ultra-high fidelity sensors, you are going to find them. And a beautiful high-resolution 3D reconstruction is not a medical diagnosis.
Right. So the spa scanner flags a tiny shadow, you panic, you leave the spa and immediately book an appointment at a real hospital. The doctor has to follow up. You get exposed to actual radiation through a CT scan. Maybe they do a biopsy, which carries real physical risk of infection or bleeding.
Yep, the cascade effect.
You get hit with a massive out-of-pocket medical bill. You spend 3 weeks in a dark spiral of anxiety waiting for pathology results, only to find out it was absolutely nothing. Preventative medicine is a noble goal, but it requires deep, contextual human judgment to filter the signal from the noise.
And the diagnostic cascade you just described is only half the problem. The other half is the unprecedented privacy nightmare.
Oh, God.
Right. If Midjourney Medical scales this up, we are talking about a private tech company building a planetary-scale database of human interiors. A photograph of your face is personal data. Your fingerprint is biometric data. But a complete longitudinal, millimeter-accurate 3D map of your internal organs over time. We don't even have a legal vocabulary for that level of privacy yet.
Who gets to train their future AI models on the layout of my heart? Do health insurance companies inevitably get access to that data stream? If the AI identifies the structural pattern of a chronic disease developing 3 years before I even feel sick, does my premium go up? The company that taught the internet how to imagine fake bodies now wants to digitize and store millions of real ones.
It's the ultimate collision of digital capability and the physical human form. But the physical takeover isn't just happening at the individual level, it's happening at the scale of massive crowds.
Yeah, let's look at the infrastructure being deployed for the 2026 FIFA World Cup across North America.
If you want to see what planetary-scale AI deployment actually looks like, don't look at a software developer conference. Look at a stadium. When you analyze the preparations for the 2026 World Cup, you realize the physical grass is just the first field. The second field, the one that actually governs the event, is an invisible matrix of pure data.
Let's break down the mechanics of this, starting with the ball itself, because it is a marvel of engineering. Adidas has designed the new Trianda match ball. On the outside, it looks like a standard aerodynamic soccer ball with a fancy new panel design.
Very traditional looking.
Very traditional. But the inside is essentially a flying sensor array. It contains an internal suspension system that anchors an inertial measurement unit, or IMU. This sensor is capturing the exact spatial location, acceleration, and rotational spin of the ball 500 times every single second.
And to understand why that 500 hertz data stream is revolutionary, you have to pair it with the optical tracking system. Around the rim of these massive stadiums, they are installing dozens of high-speed cameras dedicated solely to tracking the players. The AI processes these video feeds in real time to create a 29-point 3D skeletal model of every single player on the pitch.
So the AI knows exactly where a striker's knee or shoulder is at any given millisecond.
Exactly. Now, combine the skeletal data with the data from the sensor inside the ball. The most controversial game-deciding moments in soccer are offside calls. A referee on the sideline has to judge the exact millisecond the ball is kicked, while simultaneously looking across the field to see if the striker is a fraction of an inch past the last defender.
It's biologically impossible to do it perfectly.
It is. But the AI system syncs the 500 hertz kick data from the ball with the 3D skeletal data of the players to automatically generate a flawless, millimeter-accurate offside decision. It completely eliminates human optical error.
The stadium itself becomes an active, participating machine in the rules of the game. And the AI integration goes far beyond officiating. Google is outfitting the Argentina national team's training program with its Gemini models. They are ingesting biometric data, tactical formations, historical performance, and fatigue metrics.
It's all connected.
Millions of soccer fans aren't going to learn about the power of AI through some boring corporate white paper. They are going to experience it viscerally, driven by the pure tribal emotion of a football match.
And that massive emotional engagement provides cover for a profound expansion of physical security infrastructure.
Oh man, the security details are straight out of a near-future sci-fi novel. In host cities like Dallas and across New Jersey, authorities are deploying customized Boston Dynamics Spot robot dogs. These aren't just tech demos doing backflips on YouTube, they are being integrated into the standard patrol routines, handling perimeter monitoring, bomb detection sweeps, and crowd flow analysis.
And the brilliance of the deployment is that they are actively avoiding facial recognition on the dogs to prevent dystopian blowback. They are just normalizing robotics as boring, everyday municipal infrastructure.
They are socializing the presence of autonomous machines. We also see this in the broadcast technology. The referees are going to be wearing small body cameras to give fans a first-person perspective of the action. But if you have ever watched Reddit footage of someone sprinting full speed while wearing a camera, it is violently shaky.
It induces motion sickness.
So how do they fix that for a live global television broadcast?
They use real-time AI image stabilization. The AI takes the raw, shaking 4K video feed and digitally crops the frame. It analyzes the horizon line and the structural geometry of the stadium in the background and instantly moves the cropped window in the exact opposite direction of the referee's physical bounce.
That's insane.
It calculates the geometry frame by frame, milliseconds before it hits the broadcast truck, resulting in a perfectly smooth, gliding first-person view.
And when you reach the stadium gates, the ticket is no longer a piece of paper or a QR code on your phone. Venues are rolling out biometric, face-based access, and payment flows. Your physical identity becomes your credential.
Right.
You walk up to a turnstile, the camera scans your facial geometry, cross-references it with a massive database in milliseconds, and the gate opens. You buy a beer by just looking at a screen. The frictionless convenience is intoxicating. But again, it establishes a vast centralized database of biometric movement patterns.
Because the 2026 World Cup is effectively a Trojan horse. It is a live global stress test for high-density sensor networks, biometric identity management, autonomous robotics, and real-time AI arbitration. The world thinks they are gathering to watch a sports tournament, but they are actually participating in the mass deployment of a new planetary operating system.
It's an incredible scale, but I want to shift our focus from the massive, loud expanse of a stadium to the absolute meticulous quiet of a wet lab. Because AI isn't just changing how crowds move, it is fundamentally altering the tempo of physical science.
Well, the rhythm of a chemistry lab is entirely different from the rhythm of software development. In software, if you make a mistake, the code just throws an error message. In a chemistry lab, you are dealing with physical constraints: glass vials, volatile liquids, temperature control, robotic pipettes, and reaction plates.
Real stakes.
Exactly. A failed experiment consumes real physical resources and actual time.
So this week, we saw a fascinating convergence. The AI model, GPT 5.4, was integrated with a platform called Molecule.1 and hooked up to an automated robotic lab system to tackle a real-world medicinal chemistry problem. Specifically, they were working on something called a Chan-Lamb coupling problem involving primary sulfonamides.
Right.
Now, I am not a biochemist, but sulfonamides are a crucial class of chemical compounds used in everything from antibiotics to advanced pharmaceutical drugs.
That's a very solid baseline. The Chan-Lamb coupling is a widely used chemical reaction that bonds a carbon atom to a nitrogen atom. But doing this efficiently with primary sulfonamides is notoriously difficult. The reaction often stalls out or produces low yields because the chemical environment gets too oxidative or the catalyst degrades.
Okay.
Human chemists can spend months tweaking the temperature, the solvent, or the copper catalysts trying to find the perfect recipe.
What the AI did was analyze the massive database of prior chemical literature and identify the specific oxidative bottleneck in the reaction. And it didn't just guess randomly. It modeled the electron transfer process and suggested using an additive called TEMPO.
TEMPO, which stands for 272716706 phenols, tetramethyl piperidinaloxy, for anyone keeping score, is a stable radical. It's a fascinating molecule because it has an unpaired electron, but it doesn't instantly destroy itself like most free radicals.
So why did the AI suggest adding it to this specific reaction?
Because the AI calculated that TEMPO could act as a molecular traffic cop. In the complex soup of the Chan-Lamb coupling, electrons need to move from one molecule to another to form the bond. TEMPO safely grabs an electron and shuttles it to where it needs to go, acting as an oxidative mediator, speeding up the bond formation without destroying the primary pharmaceutical molecule they are trying to build.
That is incredible. The model deduced a chemical traffic jam and deployed a specific molecule to clear it. But the metric that truly defines this shift wasn't just the suggestion of tempo, it was the execution. The automated system ran 10,080 distinct physical reactions to optimize the process.
And that number 10,080 physical experiments is the entire point. In science fiction movies, AI is depicted as a glowing brain in a jar that magically prints out a cure for a disease while the human scientists watch in awe.
Right.
The reality is much more practical and honestly much more powerful.
It's an automated, closed loop. The AI model identifies a chemical bottleneck. It hypothesizes a solution. It writes the instructions for the robotic lab equipment. The robotic arms physically mix the chemicals across thousands of tiny wells on a plate, varying the heat and concentrations.
Flawlessly.
Massive parameters read the results, feed the data back to the AI, and the AI adjusts the hypothesis for the next batch. Human chemists are still there, but they are elevated to the role of validators rather than manual pipetters.
It changes the fundamental tempo of scientific discovery.
Yeah.
When your physical lab can flawlessly execute 10,000 reactions in a week, you have the freedom to test bizarre outlier hypotheses. You can absorb failure instantly. You can give strange, counterintuitive chemical ideas a fair trial without wasting 6 months of a PhD student's life.
Yeah.
The AI has stepped out of the textbook and into the physical experiment loop.
And this convergence of AI with physical engineering leads us directly to the twist of the week. Because while the media is obsessively focused on chatbots, language models, and AI assistants, there is a much deeper structural game being played by the titans of industry. And no one embodies this twist more than Jeff Bezos.
Bezos has always operated on a totally different time horizon. While the rest of Silicon Valley is fighting over who has the most polite customer service bot, Bezos just quietly stepped back onto the board of a new venture called Prometheus, which just raised capital at a massive valuation.
And the phrase they are using to describe the mission of Prometheus is brilliant. They aren't building an artificial general intelligence, an AGI. They are building an artificial general engineer.
Which is a profound distinction.
When Bezos talks about an artificial general engineer, my mind immediately goes to the nightmare of prototyping. I imagine the traditional loop. A team of aerospace engineers spends a year designing a new titanium turbine blade for a jet engine. They finally build a physical model. They put it in a supersonic wind tunnel. It melts or shatters under the heat stress, and they have to go all the way back to the drawing board and start over.
Yes.
Is Bezos basically trying to put an AI inside that trial and error loop to simulate the melting before they ever pour the metal?
That is exactly the bottleneck he is targeting, but the scale of the ambition is even wider. If you look at Bezos' history, he is fundamentally obsessed with infrastructure and logistics. He mastered global physical supply chains with Amazon. He mastered the hidden digital plumbing of the internet with AWS.
And Blue Origin.
Right. With his aerospace company, Blue Origin, he is trying to master the logistics of low Earth orbit. He has zero interest in building a better chatbot to write marketing emails. He is targeting the foundational design layer of the physical world.
So Prometheus is designed to ingest the laws of physics, thermodynamics, fluid dynamics, material tensile strength, and use AI to radically compress the time it takes to invent complex machines.
Precisely. Designing a robotic hand, a next-generation medical ventilator, or a fusion reactor containment vessel currently requires agonizingly slow human iteration. Bezos understands that the chat interface is just a temporary phase.
Just a stepping stone.
ChatGPT is to the AI revolution what the original Amazon.com book-selling website was to the internet. A neat parlor trick that masks the true underlying utility. The artificial general engineer is a bet that the ultimate value of AI lies in its ability to simulate, design, and optimize physical matter. He wants to own the intelligence layer that builds the hard world.
He doesn't want the assistant. He wants the engineer. But if we are talking about engineering the physical world, we have to look across the Pacific at what is happening with humanoid robotics in China. Because this is the second half of the twist.
Okay.
I look at the robotics industry in the US and Europe, and so much of it feels like theater. We get these slick, highly edited, perfectly lit YouTube videos of a robot doing a backflip or carefully folding a single t-shirt in a lab. The demo goes viral, the company raises $1 billion, and we never actually see the robot in the real world. What is China doing that so fundamentally twists this narrative?
It is a massive divergence in industrial strategy. In the West, we have a cultural and financial demand for the flawless demo. We require the robot to be nearly perfect, fully autonomous, and perfectly safe before we will even consider integrating it into a warehouse or a factory.
Which takes years.
Exactly. China is executing a brutally pragmatic, state-backed industrial policy where they are building the entire market and supply chain around the imperfect body.
Wait, they aren't waiting for the software to achieve perfect generalized intelligence.
No, they are not waiting. They are deploying the massive machinery of industrial scale while the robots are still clumsy, while they are still falling over and failing. It creates a completely different evolutionary pressure.
Look at the ecosystem moving this week. You have hardware companies like Unitree moving aggressively toward public markets to lock in capital. You have the software giant Alibaba building the underlying operating systems and foundational AI models specifically tuned for kinetic movement.
And DeepSeek.
Right. And then you have DeepSeek, a major AI player led by Liang Wenfeng, raising billions of dollars. And what is crucial to understand about DeepSeek is that it operates with unusual, tight founder control that is heavily backed by state funds. This is not your standard Sandhill Road venture capital choreography, where founders have to pivot their roadmap every 6 months to appease impatient investors.
No.
This is long-term founder control wrapped directly inside a sovereign national strategy.
So you have the state capital, the software models, and the physical manufacturing all synchronized. And the reason they deploy these robots before they are technically ready is because the physical market itself is the greatest training environment ever created.
Yeah.
When you scale up production of 10,000 imperfect humanoid robots, you immediately create a massive, guaranteed market for the suppliers of the individual components.
Right. You suddenly need factories churning out millions of tiny electric motors, high-torque actuators, harmonic drives, and high-density battery packs.
And when those component suppliers achieve economies of scale, the unit costs absolutely plummet. When the cost of an actuator drops by 80%, the overall cost of the robot plummets. When the robot becomes cheap, entirely new, low-margin use cases open up.
Companies buy them just to experiment.
Exactly. The robots get shoved into dirty, chaotic, real-world warehouses where they fail constantly. That failure generates petabytes of real-world physical training data, which is fed back into Alibaba's models, which improves the software, which makes the cheap hardware perform better.
It is an unstoppable industrial flywheel. The defining image of the robotics race isn't a perfectly polished, gleaming android doing a choreographed dance on a stage in California.
No.
The defining image is a slightly clunky, imperfect robot standing next to a Shenzhen stock exchange, backed by limitless state capital, getting ready to be shoved onto a chaotic factory floor before it even fully understands how to balance a box. China is turning physical AI into a brute force manufacturing project. They are treating humanoid robotics not as a sci-fi novelty, but as critical national infrastructure.
It is the ultimate manifestation of the hard world taking over the digital dream.
Which brings us to our final synthesis. We have covered a massive amount of ground today. We've looked at diplomatic border control for software, billion-dollar corporate debt, ultrasonic biology, the sensory architecture of World Cup Stadium, automated chemical labs, and global robotics policy.
It's been a big week.
It really has. So it is time for the power board reorder. Let's look at who's actually holding the structural power after a week of this magnitude.
If we look purely at the physics of the AI race, the foundational layer that makes everything else possible, Elon Musk and Jensen Huang are absolutely pinned at the ceiling.
Unquestionably. Because they are not playing in a single software vertical. With SpaceX, xAI, Tesla, and NVIDIA, they are simultaneously shaping global capital markets, physical semiconductor supply chains, aerospace engineering, robotics, and raw compute infrastructure.
They literally own the heavy metal that the AI runs on.
Right below that physical layer, you have Sam Altman at OpenAI continuing his unprecedented horizontal expansion. This week alone, his models were the subject of G7 geopolitical maneuvering. He executed a surgical strike against Google by pulling Noam Shazir, a living piece of human infrastructure, into his orbit.
That was huge.
And his models are deeply embedded in the automated wet lab discovery loops we discussed. He is touching the state, the talent, and the science simultaneously.
But then you look at Dario Amodei and Anthropic. They were at the center of the week's most intense drama, with the Fable and Mythos models triggering the Commerce Department. And while Anthropic is undeniably brilliant, their collision with the government exposes a harsh structural reality.
There is a ceiling.
There is a hard ceiling to lab power. You can build the most sophisticated, constitutional, mathematically elegant model in human history. But when the state decides to step in, when the apparatus of national security activates, they can redraw your entire global access map overnight. The government still holds the ultimate trump card over the laboratory.
That is the most sobering lesson of the week. We also see Jeff Bezos storming back onto the board, claiming that physical engineering layer with Prometheus. But as we map out these rising powers, we have to keep the historical scale honest. The titans of the previous era, people like Satya Nadella at Microsoft, Andy Jassy at Amazon, Sundar Pichai at Google, Tim Cook at Apple, and Mark Zuckerberg at Meta, they remain permanently locked inside the top 10.
Because narrative shock is not the same thing as structural dominance. We spent time talking about David Holtz and Midjourney Medical. The idea of lowering a human body into a warm pool of water to map their internal organs with AI-driven ultrasound is undeniably the most cinematic, mind-bending visual of the week.
It's pure science fiction made real.
But a cinematic narrative doesn't instantly displace the incumbents who own the actual concrete. Holtz is a fascinating emerging power figure. So is Liang Wenfeng in China with DeepSeek. But the foundational, unavoidable power still rests with the megacore pouring the concrete, laying the transoceanic fiber optic cables, running the hyperscale data centers, and holding the multi-billion-dollar energy contracts.
The hard world still physically routes through their servers.
Exactly.
So as we pull all of these threads together, what is the ultimate takeaway? What does this specific week reveal about the trajectory we are on?
The final synthesis is that this week did not belong to any single CEO, and it didn't belong to any single breakthrough model. It belonged entirely to the collision. This was the week that the frictionless dream of artificial intelligence violently collided with the heavy, stubborn institutions of the hard world.
Right.
AI met the state at the G7 summit. It met the brutal reality of the bond market through NVIDIA's corporate debt. It met the messy reality of human biology in a spa scanner. It met the physical crowd in a soccer stadium. It met the industrial supply chain in China. And it met the physical constraints of chemistry in a wet lab.
The digital dream layer is still there, though. We still have the smooth chat windows on our phones. We still type fun image prompts. We still watch glossy keynote presentations with founders pacing on a beautifully lit stage. That interface hasn't disappeared.
It hasn't disappeared, but it has been permanently subjugated. Underneath that slick glass interface, the hard world has definitively taken over. When artificial intelligence leaves the controlled, polite, infinite environment of a software simulation and enters real, physical institutions, those institutions behave exactly how they have behaved for centuries.
They act to protect themselves.
They protect themselves, they demand leverage, and they assert control. Governments demand kill switches and export borders. Financial markets demand massive physical returns on their debt. Human workers demand equity and ownership. Doctors demand verifiable reliability over beautiful hallucinated 3D scans.
Wow.
The institutions of the physical world do not care about your elegant code. They care about power, physics, and consequence. This is what happens when a neural network becomes a physical reality. The hard world has arrived.
It truly has. And as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you, the listener, with a final thought. We've spent this time talking about macroeconomic shifts, billion-dollar hardware acquisitions, and massive geopolitical borders. But I want you to bring this all the way down to your own daily reality.
Bring it home.
Think about the physical environment around you right now. As this technology continues to aggressively move off your lightweight screen and embed itself into the heavy structures of your life, your doctor's office, your local sports stadium, the manufacturing plant in your town, the electrical grid powering your home, I want you to look around and ask yourself a simple question.
Where is the nearest switch in your own life?
Which physical choke point controls your access, your data, your mobility, or your biology? And more importantly, as this AI empire expands, who is currently holding that switch?
Because the interface you interact with might feel like magic.
But the infrastructure running beneath it is pure, unadulterated power. See you next week when the next piece of the AI empire moves on the board.
Silicon Drama continues.